Ladies and gentlemen, some of you have been following my videos post Hurricane Florence, and the conditions are still very bad down in the Carolinas. There are many towns that are still underwater. Scenes across the Carolinas where Florence is far from over. Along the coast, the entire neighborhood remains submerged. Streets are still impassable, and residents in towns are struggling to rebuild, not to mention the 1 billion mosquitoes that have hatched down there. This came out October 2nd, 2018, New York Times. 2 weeks after a storm named Florence barreled into dozens of coastal communities, flooding homes, demolishing buildings, uprooting trees, and carving up roads. Its wrath and havoc continues, with entire neighborhoods still submerged and streets entirely impassable. So, Myrtle Beach was hit very hard. Okay, and this is Sakasti, South Carolina, a small town west of Myrtle Beach. Many residents over the weekend continue to navigate their neighborhoods by boat. Okay, the Waccamaw River having reached its high before spilling into their community and filling their homes with several more feet of murky, dirty water. About 80 miles north in Lumberton, North Carolina. So it's a single mother, and their house is still flooded, and you can see her daughter is sleeping in the car. Okay, so Patricia Fox, 56, a single mother who lost everything in Hurricane Matthew 2 years ago, once again tallied all she had lost while her daughter slept inside their four-door sedan, where they are both sleeping these days. She worked silently and alone, wearing a mask to cover her nose and mouth, carried their belongings now stained in mold. Yeah, and drag them to their lawn. Yeah, I would imagine a lot of things are damaged and probably can't even be saved. Across the Carolinas, states have been battered time and again by hurricanes and tropical storms, where this time at least 45 people died, thousands are displaced, more than 1,000 remain in shelters, and damage is expected to surpass several $billions. Florence remained far from over. A monster hurricane and a decision, stay or go. The late summer airs across the Carolinas, cracking with electronic charge of haste and dread. The sun is still shining on each beach, bars, and crab shacks, but every television was tuned to weather reports about the monster hurricane charging towards them. Yeah, I would imagine that that's a scary feeling, you know? And when that storm is going on, that's probably the height of when you really feel helpless. Okay, so, as usual, you always have people that flee and some decide to stay and ride the storm out. That is always something that is up to your discretion to whether to leave or not. And it's a tough decision. And some people are poor and they are not in any position to up and go. So they just try to do the best they can and um, just stay and ride the whole thing out. All right. So a few towns were spared. The water just would not stop. Florence landed on Friday, September 14th as a Category 1 hurricane and crawled inland as slowly as 3 miles per hour, dumping an estimated 8 trillion gallons of rain on North Carolina. Storm surge pushed rivers into historic downtowns, subdivisions, and apartment complexes. People scrambled on their roof and into boats and helicopters. On the road, drivers pulled into empty gas stations just to escape the relentless drum roll on their roof. At home, they watched the water creep like a burglar up their steps and through their front doors. The state became a constellation of islands, each city cut off from the other by downed power lines, felled trees, drowned roads, fatigue, desperation. Yeah, believe me, I feel their pain. Wow. And this brother looks like Julian H. Dove reports from the second floor of his family's mortuary business in New Bern, North Carolina, as Florence battered his town. Wow. Wow. Yeah, they're going to have their work cut out for them down there. That's for sure. It's going to take a while to even get all those power lines up. You can't do that in 2 weeks. You really can't. In Wilmington, North Carolina, a bar owner who chose to ride out the storm said so many trees were destroyed that it would take years to rebuild the city's canopy about 15 miles north of Hampstead, North Carolina. Joey Kennedy, 54, a Baptist pastor who didn't evacuate so he could care for his aging parents, walked somberly but determinedly through the flooded Hempstead Baptist Church, ready to rebuild. Still, people vowed to bounce back. Um, you know, no defense, but I remember them vowing to bounce back here along the shoreline areas that got hit hard by Sandy, and they never bounced back at all. There's parts down there around the shore, houses were never rebuilt, areas did not bounce back at all. You know, sometimes they will assess an area and determine that it's not even worth rebuilding. And that happens in many cases after these hurricanes, and they won't rebuild. Years ago when I was growing up, when these things would happen, a lot of people just had new houses rebuilt, really on the government's dime. It wasn't until I think like sometime in the 90s, maybe, where if people stayed in areas that were prone to getting, hit by tornadoes or flooding or anything like that, they now refuse to rebuild those homes. So those folks have no choice but to relocate. They can't do that anymore. But I used to hear about people getting new homes like every 2, 3 years because of some type of natural disaster that was prone to happening in their area. But this is really a shame what's going on in the Carolinas. And it is going to be years before they can get everything in that state back to where it was. This is definitely not something that's happening overnight. It's hard to believe 2 weeks later, there are areas that are sitting completely underwater still, and, if you have relatives down there, I don't know if you can reach out to them and see how they are. I was able to talk to my relatives down there, and they said they were okay. So I was glad to hear about that. But I pray for those that are down there and still struggling their way post Hurricane Florence. Please leave your comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.